OnePlus as a brand, I haven't really covered very much of here on the channel, and that's because it's still a relatively new company in this part of the world, but it's a brand that a lot of you guys continuously ask me about. And this is its current flagship smartphone, the OnePlus 8 Pro. I got this a couple of weeks after the official launch, so instead of putting out a later unboxing and first impressions, I decided to hold out a little to give you a more detailed, long-term review on this device. So here it is, the honest truth about this, the OnePlus 8 Pro. Where I really want to start off is by talking about the design, because this is one of the standout features on the OnePlus 8 Pro. It certainly looks and feels incredibly beautiful and premium in the hand. So to begin with, down at the bottom you've got a SIM tray next to a USB charging port and then some speakers. Then on the right hand side you have the power on off wake button, and then just above that is a really handy little switch, and that's the vibrate switch. On the left hand side you've got the volume rocker, and then on the top you've got the speaker grill right at the top. It's pretty flush with the exception of the microphone. Now on the back you'll notice a quad camera setup. We'll talk more about that later on, but you'll also notice a frosted glass feel on the back. It looks and feels incredibly nice, and I absolutely love this color. This glacial green color is a real eye catcher in various lighting. It really does grab a lot of attention. Now coming back to the front, I want to bring your attention to that absolutely stunning display. It's one of the standout features on the OnePlus 8 Pro. Everything from media, YouTube, playing games, anything that you would expect to do on that display just looks and feels much better. It's a fluid AMOLED screen, and right out of the box this has an FHD plus resolution, but I decided to opt it to a QHD plus resolution, which gave me a 3168 by 1440 resolution and a slightly higher PPI than the standard of 513. Now that higher resolution does have some drawbacks, which number one, it's not that much more noticeable than the FHD Plus standard. Also, it has a negative impact on the battery drain, but I decided to stick through it throughout. And one of the other things about the display is that it has 120 Hz refresh, which certainly is noticeable, particularly when you're swiping through apps, navigating through the phone. I think this is something that is much more noticeable in the hand, which unfortunately on camera might not come through. For security, there's also a fingerprint scanner under that display, and that's really easy to use day to day. Now you'll also notice that the screen does curve over, and there's some practical elements to this. I feel that for a tall smartphone like this, that curvature does help with feel in the hand and grip. But I've had a couple of occasions when the curved display doesn't respond well to touch. And this particularly happens in the lower half of that display. Not something that's consistent, but certainly noticeable every now and again. Now on the top left hand side you'll notice a punch hole design, and that's for the front facing camera. OnePlus were criticized when they first announced this because with the previous generation OnePlus 7T Pro you had the pop-out front-facing selfie camera that gave you more of a screen display. To be totally honest, I think this is better because it improves the IP rating. So now we have an IP68 water dust rating, plus it's really very unnoticeable when you're using this day to day. Next, I want to talk about performance, because right out of the box this has the Snapdragon 865 paired up with 12 GB of RAM, and then you have 256 GB of storage. Now that RAM with the processor combination means that honestly I have had no lag issues whatsoever throughout the time. I'm talking about really graphic intensive games, through to multitasking, through to a whole range of things that you would expect to do with your smartphone. It has performed incredibly consistently and well throughout. And as far as software is concerned, this runs Android 10 with Oxygen OS. Oxygen OS is really interesting because you can tell the amount of time and detail that's gone into really customizing and giving you the best features of Android. It feels like a stock Android experience, and I think this is credit to the way that OnePlus have designed the software with their devices. There are a couple of odd bits and bobs around. For example, DarkMode seems to require multiple click-throughs in the options to activate. I don't know why that's the case, but for the most part, I think if you're looking for a close to stock-like Android experience that works well with the hardware, then Oxygen OS is certainly a good software. So sticking to performance, I just want to take a moment to talk about the battery life, because for the most part, the battery life was pretty decent. Yeah, a 4,510 milliamp hour battery is included, although it would have been nice to see a slightly larger battery on this device, given its size and the fact that, if you turn on all the bells and whistles, as I had done, it does deplete the battery much faster. I think for most people, they'd be happy with this battery life, but if you're an extensive user of your smartphone like I am, by the end of the day, I was left with, on average, about 20% worth of battery life, sometimes less depending on the gaming, if I had included that during the day. But the big deal here is when it comes to fast charging. Right out of the box, you get a 30-watt USB-C charger, and to give you an example, from 0 to about 50%, it would take me around about 20 to 25 minutes consistently to get 50%, which I think is pretty decent from the battery. Next, I want to take a moment to talk about the camera, because when OnePlus announced the OnePlus 8 Pro, they really hyped up the camera. And OnePlus as a company has a bit of a weird history of over-promising on the camera front on their devices. However, certainly with the OnePlus 8 Pro, I've noticed that the camera has improved considerably. It's a much better camera than what I saw with the 7T Pro. And that's made up on the rear of a quad camera setup. You have a 48 megapixel f1.8 paired up with an 8 megapixel f2.4, which is a telephoto with 3x optical zoom, and then a 48 megapixel f2.2 for the ultra wide, and finally a 5 megapixel f2.4 for the color filter. So images taken with that camera, for the most part, I think are pretty good, and I think OnePlus have done a good job on the rear side. Consistency is certainly there, all the way from ultra wide through to 3x zoom. Color accuracy, vibrancy, saturation, even in humidity that we have currently here in the UAE, the images taken in normal lighting do a very good job. You have that main 48 megapixel sensor that you can use to take more detailed shots, but by default the images are binned down, and I think they do a good job overall. Now, where it gets a little tricky is when we start talking about low light situation, because ultra wide, and then when you start zooming in, you're going to notice noise, slight distortion in some of the images taken. And there are smartphones at a similar sort of price point that will take much better low light images than what the OnePlus 8 Pro does. But I think in normal lighting, it still does a very good job. Now, there are other cool kind of twerks that were there initially but have been patched up with updates. So that color camera filter on the back also had photochrome mode that would allow you to almost see through certain objects. That seems to have been patched up. So unfortunately, due to privacy fears or whatever. As far as video is concerned, this is where things get interesting, because I've been impressed with video on the rear side of the camera. You can record 4K at 60 frames per second, and it has a really cool stable mode, which you can see here demoed. This is a look at what super stable video looks like. I think it does a very good job consistently throughout. As you can see, I'm obviously walking, but it still does a good job at keeping that controlled. Great dynamic range as well, and I think it does a good job to keep colors accurate and consistent as well. I've really been impressed with the back-facing camera on the OnePlus. The front-facing selfie camera is a 16 megapixel with an f2.5, and it does a good job for selfies. I've been quite impressed with some of the shots that I've taken using that front-facing camera. You can blur out the background, there's good attention to detail, it has good dynamic range. But one of the things that really surprised me was when it came to video, because the maximum with that front-facing selfie camera that you can record is 1080p at 30 frames per second, which is a bit of an odd one, because on the rear you can record 4K at 60 frames per second. So if you decide to record front and back video with the OnePlus 8 Pro, you're going to have inconsistencies when you stitch the video footage together, which is really odd. So we're coming to the end of this video, but one last thing that I want to talk about, something that really got a lot of attention when the OnePlus 8 Pro was announced, and that is around pricing. This device is going to set you back in this market around about 3,500 to all the way through to 4,000 dirhams for the OnePlus 8 Pro. And that is certainly, without confusion, flagship style pricing. And this is really odd because it's odd coming from a company like OnePlus, because in the past, OnePlus was always associated with really great specs at competitive pricing. Over the last couple of years, we've certainly seen that change, and now we're in that realm where there is no confusion whatsoever. This is flagship pricing for OnePlus flagship device. I mean, it's plain and simple as that. But ultimately, you need to ask yourself whether or not you feel that what OnePlus are offering with the OnePlus 8 Pro is worth that price point. It's up against some really stiff competition because the Android flagship area now is really full of some very good, very well competitive devices. The OnePlus 8 Pro is certainly a device that I think is a flagship device now. I think that the design, the software, the specs that you get with this device would certainly, in my opinion, warrant to call it a flagship device. The confusion here is whether or not you think it's flagship enough to pay those flagship style prices. That's ultimately, I think, something that you would have to decide. I'd love to know what you guys think of the OnePlus 8 Pro and the pricing, so leave your comments in the comment section down below. Plus, if you're new around here, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit like if you enjoyed this video, and if you're not already following me, then be sure to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. Yes, I'm there on TikTok as well, posting up a bunch of tech-related content, which I think you'll enjoy. I'll see you in the next video here on EMKWAN Reviews. Until then, I'm EMKWAN. Stay safe, peace, and blessings.